Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. All right, everyone. Happy Uposatha. And this evening, on the Uposatha, I thought to round out the sort of investigation we've been making in the six recollections that the Buddha gave. Specifically, he gave as an encouragement to lay people like yourselves and how to keep the triple gem, keep the practice, keep an idea of the goal of the practice in mind, wherever you might be, whatever you might be going through the course of your life. It's something that many lay people would exclaim. It was one of these udanas or inspired utterances that people would make when they encountered the Buddha and when they heard his Dhamma and when they got to see the Sangha practicing well. They would often say, like, sadhu, sadhu, magnificent, please consider me a layperson who's gone for refuge to the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha for life. So even back at the very beginning of the dispensation, this was something that people understood. It wasn't something where you just checked it off a list. You're like, okay, yeah, now I'm a Buddhist. But that it would be something you'd be applying yourself to continuously as long as you lived. It's something you could get better at. It's something that you could deepen in. Yeah. It wasn't just membership in a club, but something that brings wholesome dhammas, wholesome realities into your life. And when the Buddha, one of the notable times when the Buddha taught these six recollections to a layperson, it was a significant layperson, as we discussed. It was Mahanama, the Sakyan who became king after the Buddha's father passed away. And Mahanama was in an interesting situation, which many of you may be able to empathize with because this was very early in the Buddha's teaching career. It was not too long after his enlightenment. One of the very first things he did was to start to head up north, and he converted, I mean, half half of his family to be monastics, and he taught them all the Dhamma. Many of them became stream enters or once returners or non-returners. Um, he established the people who were closest to him, his relatives, his family, in the Dhamma out of compassion and out of gratitude. It was something that meant a lot to him. But after he had done the best he could, I mean, not everybody took to it. Some of them, like his former father-in-law, Buddha, definitely did not take to it and had a lot of resentment towards the guy who left his daughter for 7 long years. But once everybody had got who wanted to be part of the Sangha was part of the Sangha, the Buddha said he was going to move on. And Mahanama, who had the Buddha and the Sangha and who would get to hear Dhamma teachings, was suddenly very anxious because he had all of these wonderful things right down the road. And all of a sudden, the Buddha was going to be leaving and going to be heading south to the more populous Ganges River Valley to continue spreading the Dhamma, to continue teaching people. And that would not leave much there in Kapilavatthu in the Sakyan kingdom for Mahanama to do. I mean, the Buddha would be gone. There wasn't yet much Dhamma. There were not many teachings, and therefore there were not many teachings memorized. There were no books, obviously. They didn't have written language. Yeah, so and there wouldn't be much Sangha because most of the Sangha would very obviously want to stay with the Buddha. and would tr end up traveling down south with him. So the Mahanama felt, I'm losing this Buddha Dhamma Sangha, which I just so recently got. This is terrible. Yeah. And he goes to the Buddha and says, well, what am I going to do when you're gone? And notably, the Buddha doesn't, I mean, he's given Mahanama some basic meditation instructions, but he doesn't say, oh, don't worry, Mahanama, just keep focusing on the breath. When something arises, note it and let it pass away. He didn't say, oh, just be mindful, it's fine. He'd say, oh, just keep the precepts and no harm will come to you. But rather he said, yes, well, it's true that the Buddha Dhamma Sangha, they're going to be moving south. You can recollect them. You can bring them to mind. Yeah. And in so doing, it's just as though they were there. And why I say this might be something you can empathize with is you might find yourself in a very similar situation, as I happen to know that none of you live in a monastery. You might not have the Buddha Dhamma Sangha like all around you all the time. Yeah. And so this is something that you have to do. And I think because I hear it from many people, I hear it from monastics too, to be quite honest, but it's something that lay people often come to me and say is I feel that my practice isn't where I'd like it to be. And most of them associate that with not doing enough meditation or not doing enough study. But to me, it feels that if you're doing the recollections, if you understand their function and you understand their value and how they enrich the mind, then that feeling would probably go away. Yeah, we usually feel that our practice isn't where we want it to be when we feel cut off from the Buddha Dhamma Sangha, when we feel cut off from sila, from generosity, from a recollection of the cosmos and karma and the way that things play out. Yeah. But if we learn these recollections, if we develop these recollections, then it's like we have a way to include these things in our lives in the way of, oh, well, I'm a layperson who's gone for refuge for life. Yeah. In that feeling of, I'm part of something, whether or not I'm living at a monastery, whether or not I get to visit teachers, whether or not I get to hear Dhamma talks in person, whether or not I get to make offerings to the Sangha. Mahanama he didn't have like a temple down the road, everybody was going to be heading south. So where was he going to make offerings? Where was he going to go to kind of sit and they didn't have Buddha statues. They didn't have anything. Yeah, they didn't have any iconography. Where was he going to go to sit and to vibe out and to say, "Ah, this is great. Yeah. Look at the statues, look at the stupas, look at the flags, look at the Bodhi trees. This is nice." He had none of that. Yeah. All he could really hope for was to have the mental recollection. Yeah. And so previous talks, I've covered the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha and how we can take the chants, the recollections, the epithets of the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. Those are the blueprints for how we do the recollection of the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. That's how we keep them in mind and how we develop our understanding of them. But I thought tonight I would cover the other three. The way I see it is it's a list of six, but in some ways it's two lists of three. The Buddha Dhamma Sangha is good for everybody. It's obviously a very Buddhist flavored set of recollections. Yeah, it encourages faith in the triple gem. It encourages going for refuge. It encourages um, dealing with dukkha, dealing with fear, dealing with illness. Those recollections are said to be antidotes to some of the main forms of suffering in our lives. But it also increases faith and wisdom because we're applying our mind to the very things that build confidence and that help us understand the goal and how to move towards the goal. Yeah, by recollecting those who've done it and the Dhamma that's been taught, to help lead you towards the goal. Yeah, but the second list is actually not very Buddhist coded. And you see if we can kind of tease that fact out is these are not something that are specific to Buddhists, and though it might seem like it at first, especially we talk about generosity, it was like, oh yeah, Buddhists, they're really into making offerings, right, Luciana? It's like this is something Buddhists do. They just love making offerings. They find any way they can to give, right? They are never as sad as when they have nobody to give anything to. Yeah.
Let's try one thing.
Yeah, that's right. Yes. Not making it up. And we delight in it. Yeah. It's one of the first things we're taught. It's like, hey, try giving and see if it feels good. As Sila, obviously the precepts, yeah, is a very Buddhist thing to do. And we just did them. Yeah. We just recited the precepts. You took as many as you wanted. It's not mandatory to be a Buddhist, but it's typically what we think of as somebody who is willing to say, I am a Buddhist. They've usually taken that step. They've undertaken some form of sila. Yeah. And then the recollection of the devas. And this is something that it seems like it's kind of like it's Buddhist doctrine. Yeah, it's Buddhist cosmology. It's so like, okay, we're starting to think of the world in the terms that the ancient Indians did, with the devas floating around and Brahma gods and all of that. But I'll read the sutta where the Buddha encourages these Mahanama in these recollections, and just see how the Buddha suggests he reflects on them, and see how he is meant to take them. And actually, I can probably share that so you can all see that as well. Okay. So we have the recollection of the Buddha Dhamma Sangha. By the way, this is Anguttara Nikaya in the Book of the Elevens, Sutta number 11. And this is where the Buddha encourages him to recollect sila. Furthermore, Mahanama, you should recollect your own sila, which is intact, impeccable, spotless, unmarred, liberating, praised by sensible people, not mistaken, and leading to immersion. When a noble disciple recollects their ethical conduct, their mind is not full of greed, hate, and delusion. This is called a noble disciple who lives in balance among people who are unbalanced, who lives untroubled among people who are troubled. They have entered the stream of the teaching and developed the recollection of Sila. Furthermore, you should recollect your own generosity. I'm so fortunate, so very fortunate. Among people with hearts full of the stain of stinginess, I live at home, rid of stinginess, freely generous, open-handed, loving to let go, committed to charity, loving to give and to share. When a noble disciple uh, when a noble disciple recollects their own generosity, their mind is then not full of greed, hatred, and delusion. This is called a noble disciple who lives in balance among people who are unbalanced, and lives untroubled among people who are troubled. They have entered the stream of the teaching and developed the recollection of generosity. Furthermore, you should recollect the Devas. There are the gods of the four great kings, of the 33, the Yama gods, the joyful gods, the gods who love to create, the gods who control what is created by others, the gods of Brahma's host, and the gods even higher than these. When those deities passed away from here, they were reborn there in heaven because of their faith, ethics, learning, generosity, and wisdom. I, too, have that same kind of faith, ethics, learning, generosity, and wisdom. When a noble disciple recollects the faith, ethics, learning, generosity, and wisdom of both themselves and the deities, their mind is not full of greed, hatred, and delusion. At that time, their mind is quite unswerving, based on the deities. A noble disciple whose mind is unswerving finds inspiration in the meaning and the teaching, and finds joy connected with the teaching. When their joyful rapture springs up, when the mind is full of rapture, the body becomes tranquil. When the body is tranquil, they feel bliss. And when they're blissful, the mind becomes immersed in samadhi. This is called a noble disciple who lives in balance among people who are unbalanced, lives untroubled among people who are troubled. They've entered the stream of the teaching and developed the recollection of the devas. So in that short teaching the Buddha gives to Mahanama, he doesn't just tell Mahanama, it's like, oh, hey, just think you can't you don't have a Sangha to give to, but just think about giving. Yeah. You're still alive and you can't see the Devas, but just think about the Devas. That'll cheer you up. But he lays it out as while you're recollecting these things, at that time you won't have greed, hatred, and delusion in your mind. And now I want you to consider if you feel that that might be true, yeah? If you're sitting and you're thinking about giving, or you're thinking about somebody having given something to you, in that moment that you're thinking about it, is it possible that you're filled with greed, hatred, delusion, resentment, bitterness, desire for more? Or while you're thinking about giving, while you're thinking about somebody having given to you, are you filled with gratitude, appreciation? Maybe for just one moment, does the world feel like a good place? Yeah. And maybe you quickly talk yourself out of it. You're like, okay, yeah, it was just that one time. Then they went back to being a jerk. Um, or maybe you can see that it becomes something of the beginning of a pattern that you can form, that when you get a chance to give, or when you are fortunate enough to have people giving to you, it changes your day, doesn't it? Mhm. And this is one of the things about the recollections is it's not simply um, an active thing that we have to do. It's not simply us just sitting there in a corner, like thinking, generosity, generosity, giving, giving. Who could I give something to? Who's ever given something to me? But it can also be in a passive aspect, yeah? It's like, in what ways is this part of our lives? And so the recollection is, are we making it part of our lives? Are we making it part of our thoughts? And with generosity, again, it started by saying this is not just Buddhist. So is that something you can also verify for yourself? Have you ever heard a Christian talking about giving? You know, in a Christian churches, how they pass around the basket and people will put money in it. Now they have a slightly different relationship to it, don't they? There's this idea of like you're not supposed to know how much everybody's putting in the basket. And if you make a big deal about, like, oh, I put a lot in the basket, you're considered, that's not what we do. That's not very good. Yeah. So it's a little different in Buddhism, where as somebody gives a bunch of money to the Sangha, everybody's like sadhu, 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 sadhu. Yeah, is it right, Luciana? Yeah, the head monk was like, "Oh, so and so made a huge offering to the Sangha to help us buy a new meditation cabin," and everybody, "Oh, sadhu, 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 anumodana." Because of the Buddha's teaching, the act of delighting in somebody's generosity is a wholesome act. Yeah. So if you know that somebody gave something to somebody, and that brings joy to you, and you are delighted by it, then you are making a new wholesome act, separate from their wholesome act. Yeah. And let them, if you say anumodana, if you let them know that you delight in their generosity, that's what anumodana means. Um, it's like returning to them some of the joy that they produced through the act of giving. Yeah. And we see it as through delighting in generosity, we're multiplying the wholesomeness of the act. Yeah. The quiet little act of generosity is very humble. Yeah. And it's very beautiful in its own way. But there's nothing wrong with also like a loud and celebrated act of generosity. It's okay for us to think about giving, to think about the things we've been given, and to be delighted in that. Yeah, because it just solidifies for us this very mental state of appreciation, of gratitude, which it was such an incredibly wholesome state and such a balanced state. Yeah. So any religion, not even religion, any culture that, has some way of institutionalizing the giving of gifts has at least some part of the culture where people are allowed to be happy and to be friendly and to be on good terms with each other, even if during the rest of the year they're not. And now we've come just out of the holiday season, yeah. So we've got Christmas and Hanukkah and Kwanzaa and all these different like official holidays. And isn't it considered to be a slightly less depressing time of the year, a slightly more upbeat, joyful, generous time of the year? I mean, in theory, right? I'm not going to push you hard on that one, but it's like it can be. Yeah. And why is that? Is it not because of the presence of generosity? Doesn't it make us like more inclined to give, knowing that that's what the season is all about? And in giving, doesn't it make things seem a bit better? Does it make us feel a bit more connected? Yeah. So this is active as well as passive. Yeah, just being in the season of giving, the holiday season, uh, it creates that environment, yeah, where we're not stressed out about like wrapping things and getting everything right and getting to parties and all of that. And it's the same for us. We can take that anywhere. The funny thing about Buddhists is we don't wait until like one day of the year to do that. It's like if something is good, we do it every day. Yeah. We institutionalize it by making it a cornerstone of our life's activities. Like we actively look for ways to give. Yeah. Because we know, because we've been told that this is wholesome, it's beneficial. Yeah. Now, this was something, if I actually, while I was in New York, I stretched out the recollections and I gave a whole talk for each of them. But though we'll do the last three all at once, when I talked about Donna at length, which it was it's difficult, talking to a bunch of ethnic Buddhists like Indonesians who've grown up in a Buddhist culture and telling them Dana is good. It seems really redundant because they've been immersed in it their entire lives. I'm the American. I'm the outsider. Like I had to like be welcomed into that sort of culture. Um, but one thing I don't think I is really hit on a lot or is really emphasized a lot is the fact that Dana is always wholesome. And this is something you don't even see particularly talked about in the suttas themselves, like when the Buddha talks about it, because, and I understand why, it's something that people will push back against. It's something that's a bit hard to understand. It's something that's a bit hard to accept. But I'd like to put that forth as something that is something we can work towards this understanding. Because the Dhamma is about finding truth. The thing about truth that I say over and over and over again, right, is that it's always true. And these are the things that we call truth. These are the things that we look for when we're looking for Dhamma. Yeah. We're looking for something that's stable. It's not a matter of perspective. It's not sometimes true and other times not so true. There are plenty of things in the world like that. Dhamma, something we hold up on a pedestal, it will be something that's always true. And the thing about giving, this act of letting go, is that it's always wholesome. And the way I presented this is you can verify this for yourself. So what is the opposite of giving? It's holding on, right? And how does holding on feel? Is it pleasant or unpleasant? Tense. Yeah. It's stingy, right? It's the essence of stingy. Now I need this. You don't need this as much as I do. It's mine. You can't have it. It's my precious. Yeah. And is it wholesome or unwholesome, this act of coveting, of holding to, of clinging to? We know it to be unwholesome. We know that it produces suffering in ourselves and others, right? So that is the opposite of generosity. That is the opposite of being open-handed, of giving, of sharing, of relinquishing even. It's just the act of letting go of something. So is that act, if it is the opposite of the clinging, the opposite of the holding to, the opposite of the coveting, is the act of giving wholesome or unwholesome? Is it pleasant or unpleasant? Yeah. And you can see that for yourself. It's something we might miss when we think about it in terms of like, well, how beneficial is it? Yeah, you give something to a homeless person and you think to yourself, well, I really don't know what they're going to do with that money. Did that make it an unwholesome act? You give away all of your money. Was that unwholesome? Because then you don't have any money and then you have to beg on the street? This is something that trips people up a little bit, I think, and it's worth considering when we recollect generosity. Is that the fact is, often our perspective is narrow, right? We think about immediate results. What is the immediate result of this gift? But if we expanded our viewpoint large enough, we would see that letting go is always going to be beneficial in the end. The only question, the only reason that many of the suttas go into details about how much merit certain acts of generosity are is because there is an amount to the amount of wholesomeness, the amount of goodness to it. It's not that one gift is wholesome and the other is unwholesome. Letting go is always going to be wholesome. But letting go with wisdom, letting go in a way that's purified, letting go that's highly beneficial, letting go with loving kindness, letting go, giving personally, with your own hands, yeah. All of these things make it more beneficial, more fruitful, more powerful, right? But the act itself of letting go is always going to be beneficial in the end, yeah. And this is something that we can contemplate, yeah. And if we can get to the point where we're willing to accept that, it simplifies things a lot, yeah. Then we can really just simply delight in giving. We don't need to ask the question of like, where's this going to go? Is this really beneficial? Is this the right time? Do they deserve it? We can just set all of that aside and be like, wow, wouldn't it be just wonderful if we never had those thoughts come up? If we just look forward to the act of giving. And in thinking about it in ourselves, we also think about it for others, right? And if we considered how it's always wholesome, how it's always beneficial, doesn't that make the possibility that the people we meet during the day, if we can consider, I bet they give to somebody, yeah. Then we could think, well, even that person who I otherwise detest, even they do something wholesome during the course of their day. And doesn't that become a vehicle for loving kindness or compassion or sympathetic joy? This thought that, well, they feed their cat. Yeah, they give food to an animal. That is a wholesome act. Yeah. It's not as wholesome as like giving, a whole big feast to the Sangha on the Katina Day or something. But it's still wholesome. It's still a gift. It's still a wonderful thing. Mhm. And when we recollect sila, we recollect ethics. Again, this is not just a Buddhist thing, is it? If we think of it in terms of Buddhist things, I mean, it can seem like it's just this little thing that we do as part of my practice. Often, and this is something I've verified with a lot of people, we keep it to ourselves. And I ask people, it's like, do you work? And it's like, yeah. Do you have coworkers? Yeah. Do any of them keep the precepts? I don't know. I don't think so. Sometimes it's no, no, I'm certain they don't. I've seen them wantonly break the precepts, and they try to get me to break the precepts. And like, well, why would that be? Don't they know that you keep the precepts? It's like, no, 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 we don't talk about it. Because this is something, and everybody tells me it's like, no, whoa, we don't do that. In American culture, we don't proselytize, yeah? And for good reason, we don't proselytizing. But then, like, is it proselytizing to be clear about your values? Yeah, there are consequences to being clear about your values. There are consequences to speaking about your values. If you keep the precepts, if you value the precepts, and you talk to somebody and you mention that to somebody who does not keep them, they might feel judged. They might feel that, oh, you're so special and I'm not. Oh, good for you, huh? And they might give you trouble for that. Yeah, there could be consequences. Yeah, but does that make the keeping of precepts any less valuable? Yeah. And to even take it a step further is there a possibility that in knowing that you keep the precepts, that they would suddenly know what you value? And they would no longer be so pushy about, hey, hey, why don't you come out drinking with us? And he's just like, no, no, it's against my faith. It's against my practice. Yeah, no, I really value sobriety. Eventually, wouldn't they begin to understand that, oh, this isn't them being a jerk and, being better than me. This is something they really care about. Yeah. And to be honest, it's hard to do, which is why it's like there's a fair bit of pushback to the idea of like being public about your level of precepts. But this is not theory either. Like I literally, wearing the flag of the Arahants, going down. I wear this when I go outside. Like people see me in this robe, right? I don't disguise the fact that I think that precepts are a wonderful thing. And if you read the suttas, you'll find that the Buddha never says practice the precepts quietly. Do it, do it, do it. Keep it to yourself. Keep it in your household. Like don't let people feel pressured. Yeah. It's something where if you knew how valuable the precepts were, how essential they are to the fabric of human society, then wouldn't you incline towards being with people who keep the precepts and encouraging people in keeping the precepts? And even if some people say it's like, well, I don't let them know I keep the precepts because then they would ask me what the precepts are. And then if I was messing up, they would call me on it. Right? It was like if I was at a concession machine and two bags of chips came out, and I took both bags of chips, would somebody be like, "Oh, are you stealing? I thought you were a good Buddhist. You're taking both of them? That's not right." But I mean, would it be so terrible if you had people around you know what your precepts are? And they might call you on it when you were messing up. In the Buddhist perspective, in terms of the training, that would be extremely beneficial. Remember, the Buddha is the one who said that if you had somebody who would point out your faults to you and admonish you, you should treat that person like somebody who's pointing out the way to buried treasure. Yeah. You would always benefit from that association. You would always benefit from befriending that person. And it's just not what we do, right? When somebody points out our faults, we're usually like, be quiet, I'm going in the other room. We don't think it's so beneficial. They help show me all the ways that I can improve. I want this person around. They're like a trainer at the gym. Yeah? They tell me exactly how I can improve. It's so great. We tend not to think that way, but wouldn't it be beneficial if we did? Yeah. And again, not a Buddhist thing. Like if you went to a Christian and you said, "What are the things that you do that cause you to go to hell?" They would probably think to the Ten Commandments, right? And what are the Ten Commandments except the five precepts with a little bit of deviation, yeah? Or you went to somebody who's Jewish, or you went to somebody who's Muslim. The same commandments, the same idea of what it is that causes you to go to hell. What is bad conduct? It's the same. You go to somebody who's a Hindu, they call it bad karma, but it would be the same list, right? Don't kill, steal, cheat, drink. Yeah, they would know this. So is a religious idea, but isn't it amazing that it's like all the religions had the same idea independently? Yeah. We're all pretty clear about this. Is this something that is imposed on us by our governments, by our teachers, by the people running our communities because they want us to keep in line? Or could this possibly be something kind of essential to being a human being? And as the Buddha teaches it, that's exactly what the precepts are. in terms karmically, what is the reason that people get born as a human? Well, it's because they kept the five precepts. Yeah. If you kill, steal, cheat, drink, lie, then your conduct is not great. It doesn't conduce to community. And for better or worse, human beings are communal beings. We form societies. It's very difficult for a human being to survive on their own. Yeah, you could do it, but it would be so time intensive. It would be so difficult, right? It would use up so much of your day to just to get the basics. It's so much easier when we work together. The more people you have, I mean, the easier it is to kind of get enough. Yeah, not necessarily to live in luxury, but to get enough. And once you have enough, that opens up so many things that are possible in the human life, like giving, like sila, like contemplation and meditation. Yeah. But then recollecting the devas, this is something that it's honestly kind of a little surprising to find in the list, yeah? Because I mean, the average person can't see angels floating about. They have no way to confirm what the Buddha says when he describes the cosmology, right? It's a hypothetical thing. It's like there could be rebirth, there could be heavens, yeah. But it's also set forth as a principle. It's like you don't really need to see it to be able to accept that it's possible, yeah. And this is what we do when we're working at overcoming the fetter and the hindrance of doubt is it's always a problem for us when we categorically deny something that could be true, right? That's what skepticism is. We refuse to believe something that could possibly be true, yeah, because we don't like how it sounds. No, no, heavenly realms, I've never seen anything like that, therefore it doesn't exist. We would know that that's not a very wise position to take. The fact of the matter is you can't prove that they don't exist. So therefore it is possible. And the Buddha lays out the heavenly realms, but he doesn't it's not necessarily all about just do good and you get to go to heaven, but it's about think about the fact that it is the doing of good that gets you in heaven. Yeah. And he specifically points to where is it? Bring it up, yeah. He points to faith. So this is saddha. He points to sila. He points to learning. He points to dana, generosity, and he points to wisdom. Yeah. These are the things that are above and beyond the conduct of baseline human being, right? Keeping the five precepts is the conduct that's baseline to being a human being, to baseline to being like somebody who's not creating like war and violence and chaos in their life. Yeah. But to take it a step further, to have generosity, to have learning, to have confidence in something that is pure and worthy of that confidence, to have wisdom, to be able to see both sides of things so that you don't get stuck in views and confusion. Yeah. These are the sorts of things that cause somebody to have an uplifted mind, a happy mind, an energetic mind, to see possibilities where others only see barriers. Now, what happens when you have that uplifted mind, that mind that sees possibilities instead of barriers? Well, if you pass away with such a mind, you also have opportunities in terms of rebirth. You have some manner of choice and determinism in terms of rebirth. You're not forced to just take the next available body and slog through whatever existence you end up in. Your mind is not the kind of mind that can be forced to do anything. It's the kind of mind that is calm, appreciative, joyful. Yeah. That's the kind of mind that can wait a minute and assess its situation. Like what's going on here? It turns out all that talk about rebirth seems like it might be true. Yeah. Where is it that I'm going to end up? What is it that I want? What is it I'm aspiring to? For some people, that aspiration will be here in the human realm. Yeah, it would be to come right back here and keep on doing this because it was so much fun. And if you've had that kind of life, good for you. Yeah, come back now while the Dhamma is still around. Might as well. Um, but for many, it would be, I bet I could do better. And that's what the Deva realms represent. Yeah, they're realms of subtle suffering, not overt suffering. They're realms of not much responsibility, not much chores. It's not difficult to have enough. In fact, you tend to have a lot of whatever you want. Yeah, because there is abundance. Many things are created by the good karma that you have done. Yeah, and it means there's a lot. The Buddha once gives the calculus, the economics of generosity, and he says if you were to give something to a common animal, it would the results of that, the fruit of that, would come back 100 times over the course of the resultant of that act. So if you were to give a piece of bread, it's not necessarily that you would get 100 little pieces of bread. You throw a piece of bread to a duck, you get a loaf of bread comes to you in the future. But it's the joy, the immense satisfaction, and the there's so many good things with that. And when we think you throw a piece of bread to a duck, that duck was hungry, right? They gobble it up. You helped them have enough for the day. Yeah. How might that pay out 100 times in your future? Well, it might be that you find yourself somewhere where you have enough. Over and over and over again, you get up in the morning and you go to your cabinet and you open it up and there's cereal in there. You have enough for breakfast. You don't have to search for it. You don't have to get into hunter-gatherer mode. You have abundance. Yeah, you could survive for a long time. Probably most of you could with whatever is in your cabinet right now. Yeah. And that's the sort of abundance that comes from having done good deeds. Yeah. The devas represent just taking that to a higher extreme. Yeah. When you have confirmed faith, confirmed generosity, confirmed learning and wisdom, then the resultant is abundance. The resultant is joy. And you can recollect that in the devas when you think of, and this again, this it's not Buddhist. Because you go to all the other religions and they've all got angels, they've all got like things floating around, they've all got this notion independently arrived at. And the Indian pantheon with its 33 gods in the heaven of the 33 almost exactly matches the Greek and Roman pantheons. Yeah. Even though there were thousands of miles between them. Yeah. Who was comparing notes? Like they matched at the same time. And people were figuring out the wheel, right? So yeah, it might be something kind of essential to the way the world works. And just recollecting that could bring you some measure of joy. And I know people who do that recollection. I know monastics who do the recollection of the devas, and it brings them immense joy. To consider that there are realms out there filled with beings who've just done good things and delighted in it. Yeah. But also the Buddha suggests we recollect that whatever they did, I do that too. Yeah. So you think there's some deva off somewhere who's in some paradise where he's surrounded by Dhamma teachers. How did he get there? Well, he tended to go and listen to Dhamma talks. And that uplifted his mind and caused him to really appreciate the Dhamma and want to hear it more. And so when he passed away, he was reborn in this heavenly realm where they give Dhamma talks all the time. And you could think to yourself, wait, I'm listening to a Dhamma talk. I do that. I could end up when I pass away getting the chance to go and be reborn in the heavenly realm of Dhamma talks. Yeah. This is the sort of thing that the Buddha is encouraging with that. Yeah. And you could take that in any way when you do something generous, when you do something kind, when you do something compassionate. Yeah. This is an example of the very conduct that causes beings to be reborn in such fortunate states. Right. So these are some ideas, and I'm just fleshing out the idea of recollection for you. Um, hopefully you recognize that you've heard all these things before. Yeah. if you've heard any Dhamma talks before, you've heard people talking about Dana, you've heard people talking about Sila, you've heard people talking about the Devas, whether or not you wanted to. Maybe you're like, poo poo, I don't know anything about that. Angels floating through the clouds. I don't know, grumble, grumble, grumble. But you heard it nonetheless. Yeah. So it's essential. And even if you're not taught to recollect these things, you will be presented with them. But what the Buddha suggests is if you find yourself in a situation similar to Mahanama and you say, wow, I really feel cut off from the practice, think of ways that you could start to include these things actively and passively in your environment. Ways that you could find ways to remind yourself of the Buddha Dhamma Sangha, ways that you could uh, have opportunities to give, ways that you could take the precepts. Some people take the precepts every morning, yeah, and it's their way of remembering that they are doing this. This is something I'm doing. This is something I value. Or even like recollecting the devas. And now some of us don't have a choice, right? Some of us hear things or see things, and there's the devas like make themselves get recollected. But for the rest of us, it's something we can just idly think about from time to time, and no harm done. If we do it and we recognize that while we're doing it, there is no greed, hatred, and delusion present, then we know that we are doing it right. It is something beneficial, yeah? So it's not something we have to shut out of our lives. If it's beneficial, then who cares if it's true or not, right? If it makes you happy, if it makes you have some um sense of there's hope for the world or hope for you at least in the future, then it's a good thing. Yeah, it's leading to wholesome dhammas, wholesome thoughts. Yeah. So on this full moon night, this first full moon night of 2026, I offer this for your reflection, and I hope that all of you have a good and fruitful 2026 with many more uh, Dhamma talks and Buddha Dhamma Sangha and um, great people, like I see all of you in the room here today, in your life for the coming year.